In this video, we're going to start our talk about fractions. We're actually going to break fractions up into two separate videos. This first video is going to cover the first 7 days of your fraction instruction, and it's going to be dealing with TEKS 3.3a, 3.3b, 3.3c, and 3.3e. So the first 3 days that you will be teaching fractions, you're going to be dealing with introducing fractions, talking about equal fair shares, and describing how to write the numerator and the denominator, which is our fraction notation, and using manipulatives to explore fractions. What's important to note is that students do have prior knowledge of fractions from first and second grade, but at no point in first and second grade did they have to know how to write a fraction in the fraction notation or the symbolic way. So some teachers in second grade did teach them how to write a fraction symbolically like this, but some did not. So it's important to know that your third graders may come to you not knowing anything about the numerator and the denominator. All right, so when we talk about the first 3 days, as I said, we're going to start with talking about representing fractions that are greater than 0 and equal to or less than 1. We're also going to be dealing with fractions with denominators of 2, 3, 4, 6, and 8 at this time. And we're going to use concrete and pictorial models to represent those fractions. So let's start with concrete. There are 3 ways three different type of concrete models that I want you to work with for students. The first one is the set model. So for the set model, if I gave students counters or I showed them counters like this, I might ask students, boys and girls, can you tell me what fraction of the counters are yellow? And I'd let students work on it, and then there really are 2 answers here students could come up with. One of them is 1/2, because I have 4 counters. 2 of them are yellow, so that is half of 4, right? So it could be 1/2, okay? I also could have students say, well, Miss Greer, it is 2/4 yellow because I have 4 counters and 2 of them are yellow. And of course we know that both are correct because one student was looking at this and said, I can split it down the middle. I have a counter here, counter here, counter here, and counter here. That's halves. Or as a student, I could have looked at it and said, there are 4 counters. I have a yellow, a red, and a red. And so 2/4 of them are yellow, okay? Set models can really be any type of manipulative. Color tiles, the 2 color counters, colored centimeter cubes, unifix cubes, all of those type of manipulatives could be used to create fractions using a set model, okay? Another way we want to show students concretely is with this area model fractions. We want to make sure we're showing area model fractions. So for area model fractions, I may have a fraction circle, right? And I'm going to cover up a part of that circle because I'm covering up part of the area, although they don't really know that word right now, but I'm covering up part of the area, and I want to know what fraction of my circle is pink. And of course they're going to say 1/2 of the section is pink, and they can prove that because with fraction circles, fraction squares, they can actually put the 2 halves there, take one away, and say that 1/2 because there were 2 parts to the whole and one is shaded, okay? So your area models are things such as I said, your fraction squares, your fraction circles. It could be grid paper. It can be your fraction strips, because your fraction strips can be used as well as an area model. I have one whole, and I can cover that up, cover the area up with 2 halves, right? And so if only 1/2 is there, it's you know, the fraction 1/2, okay? So your fraction strip can also be an area model. I do want to say something about the fraction books that people create. I really prefer, based on working with students, I really prefer you create these fraction strips with your students, because you can manipulate them and play so many games with them that you can't do with the books you create. The books you create are fun and it might be a good lesson, but after you've created the book, students really don't use it for anything else, okay? All right, so we have the area models, and then we're also going to work with the length models. The length models can be many things. Once again, this is a length model, because if I have my whole, I can put my half down. I see that it's not really showing. There you go. And I can see that half of the length is represented by the yellow piece. My favorite manipulative when I'm talking about length fractions are, or even area model fractions, are the Cuisinart rods. And I can see that a half, 2 yellows make a whole orange, so half of the orange is yellow. As I said, length models can be your fraction strips. Length models can be Cuisinart rods. And also when we get into talking about representing with number lines, your length model is the number line pictorially, okay? And then, so this is concretely, and all of these models I can then turn into a pictorial model for students, okay? Like I showed you here. I can turn this into a pictorial model. This one, I can turn this into a pictorial model. Right? This is my strip diagram. Oh, should not have drawn all that. There you go. This is my strip diagram. This is a whole, and this is 1/2. This is also, can also then be my number line. If this represents a whole, what is half of that whole? It is right there. Okay? So these, when you do these concretely, also with them start working towards also looking at them pictorially, so that students have both or all the models to use. All right? Then, as you're talking to students, so this is really representing fractions, right? Now we can start talking about unit fractions as well. And basically, when I'm talking about unit fractions, a unit fraction is just it represents one part of a whole that has been divided into equal parts. So, if I'm talking about, I'm going to make a fraction here for us. Okay, and I'm going to use my Cuisinart rods because they are my absolute favorite. With Cuisinart rods, any one of the rods can be a whole. Okay, that's what I love about them. It's so flexible. And we have to learn thirds, so we're going to do this one. Okay, so I could say, boys and girls, I have the green rod. I want you to find out what is 1/3 of the green rod. And so students would play with the Cuisinart rods, and hopefully they come up with this. So you told me that if this is 1, then what would this fraction be? It would be 1/3. What would this fraction be? 1/3. What would this fraction be? 1/3. So together, they all equal 3/3, which is equal to 1 whole, right? When we have one part over the denominator, that is called our unit fraction. Okay? So, on those first 3 days, as I said, you're going to use concrete models, you are going to use pictorial models, and you're going to teach students the symbolism for a fraction. You are then going to teach students the term unit fraction. And you really can do that all in the same lesson. As you're building concretely, you then build pictorially and show them the exact same thing. They need to see it side by side. You're talking about what is the unit fraction every single time students create a fraction or you talk about a fraction. Okay? All right, so from there, it's students practice composing and decomposing fractions. All right, so basically composing and decomposing fractions, you're going to compose fractions using unit fractions, and you're going to decompose fractions using unit fractions. So you don't have to do 3/4 plus 1/4 equals 4/4, or 2/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 equals 5/3, right? So, or whatever I said. It's that you're only doing, only composing and decomposing into unit fractions. You're dealing with fractions that are less than 0. But in this one, denominators can be any number. So you're not limited to 2, 3, 4, 6, and 8. As I said, I love the Cuisenaire rods for this. So I can give kids a Cuisenaire rod and say, boys and girls, I want you to take the blue Cuisenaire rod and I want you to find all of the color trains for the blue Cuisenaire rod. And so kids just explore and like, nope, purples aren't going to work. Nope, 2 greens aren't going to work. 2 blacks aren't going to work. Let's see, what about reds? How many red pieces? Is red, can I break the blue up into equal red parts? And I'm going to look and say, nope, can't do that. Let me see what that one was. I may have picked one you can't even do that on. I did. I love it. Okay, so I may do this. Okay, oh, that one works. So I would do that. That's a light green. I mean a dark green. Will 2 light greens do it? Yes. There you go. So students are going to play around with it, and they'll be able to tell me when we get to, I mean this one I could have done, it would just be all of the units, right? It would just be 1/7. So basically you make color trains with students. What are all the ways I can make a whole based on whatever your whole is? And kids need to realize that whole is not always the orange rod and Cuisenaire rods. The length of any rod can be a whole. I can add 2 rods together, 2 greens together, and make this the whole if I wanted to. And then we could talk about the parts underneath it. So that's why Cuisenaire rods are so great to use with fractions, because it really gives students that experience that any color rod can be the whole, or a combination of rods can be the whole. Okay, so I could continue on, because then I could put, anyway, so they could say, well, if the green is the whole, the red is 1/3, 1/3 represents 1/3, a red piece represents 1/3, a light green piece represents 1/2, right? If the whole is blue, then each piece underneath it represents 1/7. And what is 1/7, boys and girls? It is a unit fraction, right? So this is composing and decomposing fractions. You can even do things here with pattern blocks. So I want to decompose the pattern block into halves. Well, I can do that, right? Oh, I get it there. I can do that. Can I decompose it into thirds? Can I decompose it into fourths, fifths, sixths, and so forth? Okay. So that's composing and decomposing fractions. I'm using manipulative. I'm assigning a whole, and then students are creating. I want you to find 1/3, or you're allowing them to explore and come up with all the different ways that fraction can be decomposed with that manipulative. Okay. The next thing that students will be doing these first 7 days is they'll be looking at partitioning objects. Okay, I would start out with real objects. For instance, we could start out with, let's see what color I want to start out with. Okay, so let's say I have 2 of these, and we can pretend that these are cookies. We're going to pretend they're cookies for our little video. So I have 2 cookies, and I want to split them among 4 people. Okay, so what would I have to do? Well, I want to split them among 4 people, so I need to split these 2 up into halves, right? So students can then find out what is half of this. Let's see. Need another baggie of Cuisinaire's. Don't have 2 more purples for some reason. I love these videos are real live. Okay, so once I know that I'm sharing this with 4 people, and I can draw my people here, then I can easily show that each person is getting 1/2 of a cookie. Right? But let's say there's 8 people, or I may have to do something else. Let's do a different one. And I would start with partitioning with concrete objects, and then you're going to want to move into more more pictorial. And even if they don't give them a picture, have them always draw a picture. But I do believe, let me check out the teak. Yes, it gives them pictorial representation of fractions. So they're always going to have a picture model to look at when they're having to partition objects. And so you saw one with the concrete, so I may have 2 pizzas. I don't know. We're going to say they're not the best pizzas. And I want to separate it. Actually, no, let's do more pizzas. I'm going to separate this between 2 people. Right? So, I know that each person can get a whole pizza. I'm good with that. Right? So then I'm left with this half, or this pizza. So I have to have 2 people. I need to separate it into halves. So each person gets 1 and 1/2 pizza. Okay? That in itself is partitioning objects or sets into equal groups, or among 2 or more recipients. Remember, you are going to be have pictorial models, but I would start concretely, then introduce the pictorial models. Okay, so I'm looking over my instructional talk page to make sure that I said everything about representing fractions. We represented with strip diagrams, with a number line, concrete and pictorial models. We talked about the different ways to represent fractions with area models, length models, and set models. We talked about unit fractions and decomposing fractions. And we talked about partitioning an object into partitioning an object or a set into two or more recipients. I really think what's great about that take partitioning is always use food, because kids know, they have background and schema on sharing food. Alrighty. I think that's it for right now. Next video we're going to talk about equivalent fractions and work on fractions, comparing fractions, and then working on number line fractions briefly again. So see you in the next video.